crossed over, and shaking in their boots. They are going, oh my gosh, they're coming over. Rahab already warned them that their hearts are melted. Told the spies, they came back and gave that good report, and so they're ready. This miracle of crossing over the Jordan, the waters just stopped, just like they did when they crossed the Red Sea. And here's another memorial that they'll leave behind for generations to come. And they are just amazed. When we see God do these amazing things in our life, we kind of look back and we can lean on them, right? These like ventures of faith when he brings us through the next chapter. And when we go through these next chapters, we go, oh yeah, I remember that memorial. And you're going, wow. And so they left these stones just high enough to come over the water that they can see them to that day for generations to come, right? And God told them 40 years, and sometimes, only 2 of them are now going to enter into the promised land, but they had to wander around, bump their heads here and there and around, and we do the same thing in our journey. And so now they've crossed over, and we talked about worship comes before warfare, right? We talked about how God gives us things, and then he asks of things. He'll give us those things that we've been praying for, but then he asks, hey, I want you to do this and do that. And so he asked them to get their hearts right. Their hearts right was to get circumcised and cut away in the flesh, cut away in the heart. It's symbolizing the heart, the things that are wicked, that they were chasing after, idolatry and the idols and the false gods. And so true today, right? We chase after these false things that are in front of us that we kind of like get numb to because society and TV and social media, they're like, it's okay. And our kids see more and more and more. It's right in front of them all the time now, even in the school districts, right? It's crazy what they're doing. And you would never think in 1,000 years that would ever come to pass. Like the things that are just, it was always going on, but now it's like, we're going to tell you what's going on verbally, and what are you going to do about it? And it's really scary. And the ones that are confused, and the parents and the kids, and they just go, well, I get it. No, they're just not educated on history. Just go back and do your work. But we, just like the Israelites, lazy people, not wanting to be obedient to what the tough things are in life. There's tough things, but here, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's the saying here at Fit to Serve. But in ministry and everything in our spiritual walk, it's really get comfortable with the uncomfortable. How do you do that? Well, some people aren't up for the challenge. Well, you just miss out on the blessing what God's going to give you. A lot of them didn't want to get comfortable and uncomfortable. Even when they're taken out of slavery, you think like, a person gets out of prison, like, here you are, your free card, you're out. No, I'm going to go back in 20 more years. Some do. I mean, they just have to go back in. They can't be in society. They don't want to talk to people. They want this everyday thing that they're systemized. They got a meal, they got a bed, they got their peoples around them. And then when they have to just apply for a job, right? They have to do some basic things. No, I'm good. I'm going to go back in, right? They wanted to go back in. They were grumbling and complaining against God. Get me back into Egypt. It's like, we look at that, and a lot of times we do that in our life. We laugh at it, but we do the same thing. We go, hey, God, I don't want to do it. And he goes, okay, here you go. You asked for this, but I'm going to give you this. That's what he did. He said, hey, I'm going to part the Red Sea. I'm going to part the Jordan, and you're guys going to come over to the promised land. You guys have been trying to get in there for 40 years. Now you're here. Now what are you going to do? But I'm going to ask you to do something. I mean, grown men, now they're ready to get circumcised and get their hearts right, and down wounded, right? Like down for several days before they go in the war. That doesn't make sense. And so when we're going into battle, this battle was a spiritual battle. When we go into battle, it's spiritually a lot of times than having our physical weapons. Like, I've gone to Stanford. I got this knowledge. I've gone to all these people who've equipped me in life to now handle this. Nope, that doesn't work, right? It's the simple things that God is telling you to walk in is by faith. And that's why we've seen Rahab, she's in the hall of faith because of the faith that she had to hide despised. And she's a harlot. She's a prostitute. How can she be in the genealogy of Jesus, King David? I mean, that's amazing that she's in the Bible, her name. And that's what God does with us. He takes the ordinary, does extraordinary. He takes the ordinary to do extraordinary things if our hearts get right. And so when I talked about the worship before warfare was just like we sing today, as we worshiped and getting our hearts right before the battle. Because as he gives us the next step, there's warfare. And this was the first attempt that they're going to have on warfare was Jericho. This was the first attempt of going, okay, you're going to walk around Jericho, 7 days, 6 days, and on the seventh day, 7 times. Doesn't even make sense. And then blowing the trumpets, right? Like, the trumpets? Give me an Uzi. Like, where's the machine guns? Like, right? Like, where's my ammunition? No, just walk around. And they were probably just, the people in Jericho behind these big walls are like, what are these guys doing? They're just walking silently. So they're obeying. They're like, don't say a word, until the 7th day. And then you're going to let out a big shout. And they're like, come on. I mean, how many of us would question that, right? We would question and God does that with us, like these things that don't even make sense. Like, no, come on. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to get out my weapon. I have a weapon. Let me go in the front. And so we try to take charge of our life. And God says, I know, patiently, wait on me. I'm going to show you. Have joy through, as we know our verse this week, joy through the trials, right? With patience and endurance. I'm going to show you the next steps and the next steps. So as we move through this, it's exciting because the Israelites, they're going to have many battles. But God was preparing them that even when they were walking towards the Jordan, to keep their eyes on the Ark of the Covenant. And that's just a picture of us looking up, not looking left, not looking right. Because we do swerve off into the fast lane when we need to stay in our lane, if that's slow, or the middle lane. And as we look off, and I teach this in fitness, where your eyes go, your body follows. If you look over here, your balance, you go here. If you look over here, you have to keep your eyes straight. As an athlete, you have to keep your eyes straight to stay balanced, to stay centered. So it's the same thing spiritually. We have to keep our eyes up, lifted up, and look at the Lord, right? As we're walking through these things that are distracting us in life. So let's pick it up in verse 19, chapter 6. It says, but all the silver and gold, the vessels of the bronze and iron and consecrated to the Lord, they shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpets, and the people shouted with a great shout that the walls fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with edge of the sword. They utterly destroyed all. This was God's judgment on the people. We see that the people had all kinds of perverted rituals that they took part in. There was rituals that were bathed in sin, violence, sexual immorality. There was archaeologists that uncovered a library of early Canaanite texts dating right back to the time of Joshua, demonstrating that their religion was all about their own gods. These are writings that they found. El, Baal, Anath, Astarte, and Asher were lusty, murderous beings, horrible things that they were doing. The people building their houses would sacrifice their children, put their bones in little jars, and embed the jars in the walls of their house to keep out evil spirits. That just sounds horrible, right? It is now time for judgment on the people to come. And God is going to use the armies of Israel to bring about his judgment. One archaeologist wrote in the Open Bible, exterminating the Canaanites in the time of Joshua was not a question of destroying innocent people. It was a question of destroying or being destroyed. Separating or being contaminated, being quarantined from the plague, or having the plague destroy everyone. There was sin. There was things that were going on in Canaanites' lives. Verse 22. But Joshua had said to the two men who had spied out the country, go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her. The young men who had been spies went in and brought Rahab, her father, her mother, her brother, and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. So we see the Jewish tradition has it that Salmon was one of the spies that went out and got the good report, who later married Rahab, and was one of the descendants of King David and Jesus Christ, right? So that's amazing that genealogy that she's in. And so one of the spies did marry. Salmon married Rahab. Left them outside the camp, verse 23. This was a temporary sort of quarantine. Later, they were incorporated into the people of Israel. Verse 24 says, but they burned the city and all that was in it with fire, and only the silver and gold and the vessels of the bronze and iron, they put it into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's house, and all that she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Then Joshua charged them all the time, saying, cursed be the man before the Lord who tries to rise up and build this city Jericho. He shall lay its foundation with the firstborn, and with his youngest he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the country. And we see in 1 Kings chapter 16, 34, it says, in the days of Hail, Bethel built Jericho. He laid the foundations with Abram, the firstborn, and with his younger son, Segum. He set up the gates according to the word of the Lord, which he had spoken through Joshua, the son of Nun. So until that time, the city of Jericho had not been rebuilt. It was apparently Mr. Heel didn't pay attention to Joshua's curse, and he paid dearly for it, for he lost 2 sons with building the city. So it was like 500 years later, being rebuilt. So nothing was built on that. And so we see that faith is counting on God, even when you don't see him or understand what's going on. We know in Hebrews 11:1 it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, for by it the elders obtained a good testimony. Sometimes we see, I don't see God. I don't understand why he wants me to do these things. I don't trust him. See, the Israelites took so long to step into the promised land because of their lack of faith. And so many times we do the same, right? The lack of faith of what God is trying to tell us to do, and we question and we lean on our own understanding. In Proverbs it says, trust in the Lord, lean not on your own understanding, right? With all your hearts. And so Hebrews chapter 3, verse 16 through 19 says, for who, having heard, rebelled? Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt, led by Moses? Now with whom was he angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpse fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest? But to those who did not obey, so we see that they could not enter because of their unbelief. They couldn't see how they were going to be able to conquer all those giants. In contrast, the writer of Hebrews tells us why this first city was conquered and the walls came down. So how was the faith involved with the walls coming down? Did the Israelites close their eyes, moan, use their force, cause the walls to crumble? No. They did an unusual thing. When they crossed the Jordan and then got circumcised in obedience to God, they did an unusual thing by keeping their mouths shut.